I am Rachel Humphrey with DEI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering personal success in the hospitality industry. And I am delighted to welcome to the show today an incredibly well-known hospitality industry executive, Jeff Higley, the president of the BHN Group. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to see you. We don't cross paths enough, so even though it's digital, it's great to chat with you. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and for anyone out there who's not familiar, Jeff, with your bio or background, I would encourage them to visit deiadvisors.org and check out your bio there. You and I are going to spend about 30 minutes together today talking about your path to hospitality industry leadership and some of the lessons you've learned along the way. So we're going to jump right in. One of the things that I personally love about our industry so much is that everybody's path, everybody's journey is so incredibly different. You and I have had a very different or unique path, but yet we've ended up in similar places with similar networks in a similar industry. So tell us a little bit about Jeff's journey to leadership and how you got to the role that you have today.
Well, it's a long and winding road, so I'll try to be brief. I mean, when I was a young kid, I had incredible role models, my parents, but I think the women in my life were incredible role models and still are to this day. My mother was very strong, worked, had 7 kids, worked through the whole time. My grandmother was a Rosie the Riveter, and talks about when she was the only person that walked into a bar afterwards, the only female, and just taking that role of being themselves and being leaders in their own right. I have 5 very strong sisters who have very strong personalities and leaders. My wife, my 3 daughters. I mean, it just goes on and on. So, that kind of taught me just a leadership role, be aware of everything in your surroundings. I thought I had leadership qualities from the very beginning, from, I was senior class president in high school, very active in college with the newspaper and, just our class, got out of school and knew that I was, destined to lead in some way. And so became a sports editor, covered sports forever. So I got to see alpha personalities in, day in and day out, interviewed many coaches, successful coaches, and players, NBA, Major League Baseball, football, college football, and high school. You really don't realize the leadership abilities that high school coaches have because of the influence that they have on such a variety of people and young people, very influential people. So, my career, started out in the newspaper business and daily newspapers. I worked my way up, eventually left sports, and became the managing editor of a magazine that still exists. It's called Hotel Management, but now it was Hotel and Motel Management back then. And, became the managing editor. So led the team in terms of just producing the magazine, and it was at the time in mid late 90s. That was there was no internet, so and we had a big staff just cranking out a lot of copy, and the career just kept growing and growing from there. I went on to STR, became had a leadership role there, and very influential in my life. All of them there, particularly Randy Smith, Mark Lamano, Amanda Height, who's still there as the president. They all kind of let me do my thing, and my thing tends to be letting people do their things, right? You kind of outline what you need them to do and what you'd like them to do, and then let them go. So that path to leadership then became when I had the opportunity to join North Star Travel Group and the BHN Group. North Star is the parent company, to lead this events company, and so I guess the common denominator, that leadership journey, has always been, I just believe that I knew what I was doing. even though all the time there were times that I didn't. But at those times I wasn't afraid to ask, and I'm still not afraid to ask. And I know we'll talk a little bit about some of those qualities as we go along here today. But I think that journey, it was long. It was very diverse. It was very, just opportunistic in the sense that if I had an opportunity to do something, I would, yeah, why not? Let's do it. It sounds fun. It sounds enriching. It sounds an opportunity to grow. So I think that's a key to any journey to leadership is identifying, opportunities and leaping at the ones that sound like a good chance.
I love that. And you've talked about so many topics in that introduction that I definitely want to cover. One of the things that's interesting, and you and I have not talked about this previously, is there's a direct correlation for women, especially between participating in youth and high school sports and ending up in the C-suite. So your comment about the impact that coaches have as leaders there is something that really resonates with me. And you and I are definitely going to talk about that some other time. I want to talk a little bit about taking risks, because one of the things we hear from a lot of leaders is that their scariest risks have resulted in some of their greatest growth as leaders. And you mentioned both pivoting from sports to the hotel industry, which would have meant leaving the comforts of one subject matter that you knew very well, your connections, your contacts, moving to another. And then when you switch over to the BHN group on the conference side, as part of North Star, getting a complete pivot from journalism there maybe, or the editorial world. How do you tackle risks? How do you decide which ones are worth taking? Do you consider yourself a risk taker in general?
Yes, I'm a risk taker in general. They may be varying degrees of risk. I probably stay away from the big leaps. I'm a little too much of I don't know, fraidy cat's the right word for that, but that's what I'll call it. But risk taking to me is a calculated proposition. I mean, obviously you have to weigh the pros and the cons. In my particular case, I was fortunate enough to position myself where the risks I was taking in my career moves were to very respected organizations. And that lessens the risk because there's a trust factor. And when you build that trust factor with something, I think your risk, your aversion to risk just gets reduced greatly because there's a comfort level there. So yes, while I tend to take risks, I also tend to take my time to make those decisions. I think that's probably one of the attributes that sometimes endears me to people and sometimes makes people frustrated with me. I'm a classic, let me sleep on that guy, because I want to make sure I'm thinking it all the way through. So it may not be a decision when it involves particularly a bigger risk, may not be a decision that I make snap. But with all of that said, it still boils down to what you feel in your gut. And, I had the pleasure, I've interviewed him many times, but Sebastian Bazine from Accor, and this was at our HiCap conference last year. And, I asked him a similar question. And he kind of responded, he said, I think with my stomach.
Interesting.
If it feels right in my gut, in my core, then I'm going to go with that. So he and I agree with that 100%. So, that's a lot of where that risk decision-making takes place. It's like, well, okay, it feels right here. So I'm going to go with it. It's, sometimes it is a risk, sometimes it isn't, but I feel the same way hiring people. Generally in the first few minutes, you're going to take that risk and hire somebody because it feels right in the gut.
I definitely go with my gut in the hiring side as well. And I think what you said is interesting. You think things through, but you don't make snap decisions about it. But I like what you said too about taking a risk in going to reputable places takes a little bit of that edge off. That's great advice. Anyone who's listened to the show before knows that I love to share why I have asked certain guests to join us. Something that I have learned about you or heard from you that has really impacted my own style of leadership in the industry. And I remember asking somebody when you made the decision to pivot over to the BHN group, are you surprised by Jim's successor? And they said, absolutely not. Jeff has the deepest and broadest relationships of anybody else in this industry. And that really resonated with me because it was a reminder to me that relationship building can impact our trajectory in ways that we don't even think about. It may not be closing a deal or getting someone to respond to an interview or something else, but it can really be a huge part of our personal brand or who we are. Talk a little bit about how you network, how you have built those relationships that are now legendary in our industry, and what advice you would give to others that see that as maybe a challenge that they have in their own leadership development.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to find out exactly why you invited me. I appreciate that. So, I'll kind of go backwards in the way you asked the question. I think, the advice that I give, number one, is be yourself. I hope that I portray an image of this is what you get. And I'm going to be this way, whether we're having an argument over something I wrote, or a philosophy that we have at BHN, or whether we're agreeing over and talking sports over a beer. I think the more that you can be yourself, the more that you are yourself around people, the less you have to kind of go, wait a minute, how do I have to act around Chris Nassetta or Jeff Bellotti versus, a GM at a hotel? To me, it's like, well, I'm going to act the same way because that's all I know. I think that genuine approach to building a relationship is really the essential element to it all. And, with my, my career being so oriented in the early days with media, the other thing with relationships is as long as you're fair to people, they are okay, even if you have to write something that's a little maybe not completely flattering for them. So telling both sides of the story in that regard was always my mantra. I'll always call you. You may not want to talk, but I'll always call you and ask you for what your take is on this. That genuine, open approach has always been has always worked for me. And this is the hospitality that embraces that kind of personality. It really does, because these are people all the way through. If I'm on stage and a little bit of ham comes out, that's okay. People maybe roll their eyes, but they go, yeah, that's Higley. We kind of expect it from him. So, that genuine approach is I think what sells people. I don't have to be anything I'm not, because people know what I am.
I love that. And I love being your genuine self and not having to be somebody that you're not, in building those relationships makes them much deeper than if you are pretending to be something that you're not in order to develop the relationship. You just mentioned being on stage. And as you know, I had the opportunity to speak with Stephanie Ricca the other day of Hotel News Now. And she says, I picked print journalism, and yet I view her as one of the most dynamic public speakers that we have in our industry, especially on the moderating side. Has public speaking come easily to you? Same type of thing in choosing print journalism? Were you not imagining a future of being a public speaker? Much like relationship building, public speaking is one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of people feel that may impact whether or not they become the leaders they want to be.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Whether I'm speaking in front of one person or probably the biggest crowd is maybe 3,000-4,000. I'm a wreck inside, total wreck when I'm on stage. And people are like, "Really, you don't look like it." I'm like, "Believe me, I'm a wreck." But I think it goes back to what I was talking about before. There's a comfort level of, hey, this is what I am. And people ask me a lot, well, what's your advice about public speaking? the old Brady Bunch theory of you imagine everybody in their underwear and that relaxes you, and that's not for me. I mean, basically it boils down to me, if you know your stuff, you're going to be fine. So do your homework, speak about what you really know. Don't try to talk about something in depth that maybe you don't. Maybe you touch on it and admit, yeah, I know a little bit about that, but that's not my forte. Just I think that's an important element to it, because if you know it, it shows. There's a confidence in you that just it. I mean, there are some speakers, Jan Freitag from CoStar. I mean, he's just a fabulous speaker because he knows his stuff. And I learned a lot from him while I was there, just watching him. And there are many others. But, it's amazing the vibe you get from a speaker who knows they're comfortable with their subject matter. So that's always a key thing. And, in my case also, I will admit, I do use a confidence monitor sometimes on stage with our events to make sure I don't miss anything, but, just trying to, again, inserting some of your personality into your public speaking is really important too, because then people can relate to you as a genuine person that they can relate to, right? You're not some, statue up there trying to espouse these things. You speak what you know, you speak with confidence, and you kind of speak from your heart, and people kind of can relate to that. And of course, the other advantage is if you're on stage and there's a bunch of bright lights and you don't see who's out there, you can't see them. So you're like, okay, maybe the room's empty. I don't know, but I'm gonna, that puts me at ease. But there's still, it's still, and I talk to a lot of people in green rooms and speaker ready rooms, and it really is fascinating how many people are very nervous, regardless of their experience speaking, their stature in the industry. Nobody wants to go out there and mess up. So there's that nervousness that you have to overcome.
No, I think knowing your content preparation, incredibly critical. I do get incredibly nervous, which always shocks people when we talk about this a little bit. I disagree with you. I don't like the bright lights because I don't know if I'm engaging people or not, because I feed off of whether people are finding whatever I'm saying or leading valuable. And so it makes me more nervous when I can't see whether we have people's attention or not. So that's an interesting difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair statement, and I will say that, even with bright lights, you can see, right. There's a few rows there. And one other piece of advice that was given to me early on was, kind of scan the crowd and find a couple people that are kind of friendly looking to you, and maybe they're nodding their head or smiling, and focus on them and kind of look at them, and they're giving you reassurance all along. They may be thinking, oh, this guy is just full of it, but at least their body movement, their body language is kind of giving you that confidence that, okay, I'm doing okay.
I will add too that confidence monitors are not easy to be public speaking from. So that's a whole skill set. You can be a great public speaker and then actually have to learn how to manage that.
Oh, especially the teleprompters, man. Yeah. They can be a little tough, but anyway.
You mentioned believing early on that you had leadership in your genes, in your path. And that's something that we don't hear from a lot of people. As you continue to recognize that, hey, I may be a leader someday, certainly there were probably some skills that you came across that you did not innately have, or that you knew that you would need to develop, or maybe saw in others that you're like, I need to learn a similar skill. Can you give me an example of maybe a skill or two that you've had to work on to develop, and how you went both about identifying that it was important for your leadership, but also how you went about developing it?
Absolutely. There's one that I still battle to this day. And that I want to make sure I have it the right way. it's being, sometimes I have difficulty being direct with people and telling them exactly what I want to tell them, because it may be a little inflammatory, or it may be confrontational. I have a very difficult time with that, and it takes a lot of preparation, to gear up for that. So, my answer to that, well, let me rephrase that. My learning process for that has been to watch people and trying to understand the dynamic of what's going on, whether it's, directed at me, or I'm involved in a meeting that people, have that personality trait that allows them to do that. And, it's something that you really have to push yourself to do if you don't have that natural directness. You don't want to go overboard, but you got to be, being firm. I'm fine with that, but there's sometimes where it's just, I don't want to create a confrontation, even if the subject matter, might be leading to that, and that's, basically that's what, kind of retracing some of the things that we've already talked about. It still boils down to, knowing what you're talking about, being yourself, but being, clear and concise in the message. As you can probably tell by this interview, sometimes I'm not clear and concise. I kind of ramble a little bit. So trying to really focus on that clear and conciseness is a big, that clarity. You just, that's a challenge for me that I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I still, like everyone, still have ways to go.
It's incredible that being yourself and knowing your content weaves through several different aspects of your leadership for you. I think that that's a really interesting thing to look at. Do you define your leadership style in any way? Do you think, we hear some people say, I'm a servant leader, I'm an empathetic leader, I'm a teams first. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is there a way that you would say, when I think about my leadership, I think that I am a what leader?
The first word that comes to mind, I'm a people leader, and by people, I mean I guess that's empathy. I really put myself in the position of the people I'm leading, and try to establish guidelines, principles that fit their needs, not only for work, but for non-work. I'm a big believer in the work-life balance being important. It's not always there 100% the way you want it. We have to work hard sometimes. And you speak of Stephanie, and she probably she'll be nodding her head if she's watching this. I've always told people when they say, "Oh, can I do this? Can I take this day? I know I'm going to get my pound of flesh out of you someday. So yes, please do it, because there's going to be a weekend or an evening that I'm going to need you to finish this project." And that to me, I think carries a lot of weight with people with a leadership style, when they see that you're putting yourself in their position. The other thing that sticks with me, and this comes from a leader, his name is Mike Malley. He was the publisher that hired me at Hotel and Motel Management. And I knew we shared the same traits. When I had applied for the job, he called me at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. And, and I picked up the phone. I didn't know who it was. And, his work ethic was just strong. But he told me this, and I've really, really kept it very top of mind. He's like, as a leader, you don't want to lead a bunch of clones. You want everybody to be able to express themselves, to be themselves. There's that, that thread again. So, you want to hire people that are a little bit different from you, and with skill sets and personalities, etc. But when you're leading them, you try to lead them obviously in a collective way. There has to be a certain set of parameters you follow. But on an individual basis, when you're dealing with them one-on-one, you kind of personalize that leadership to what works for them. So, being a leader, I feel like, I did have that in my genes, but that doesn't mean it's always easy, because you've got to really think about, that group setting versus the one-on-one setting, and what works for some doesn't work for others. But the key to me is really that individuality, and allowing that to take shape, and allowing that to shine through. Because at the end of the day, I know I could probably say this with certainty. I'm never the smartest guy in the room. So, even with my team, I look at this and go, I got a lot of smart people that I want to learn from, that even, some of the people I'm, leading today and have led in the past 10 years, a generation or two behind me, what they bring to the table. So you have that back and forth leadership where, it's okay to learn from them, and it's okay to show them that you're learning from them. So really, to me, it's all about, that focus on people, that people leadership.
I love that. And learning from each other, regardless of our roles within companies or the industry, is so important. I knew we were going to run short on time, and we will. I want to talk, you just mentioned work-life balance. And certainly earlier you talked about your wife and your children. Talk a little bit about how you have managed. You've had jobs that have been very demanding, both from a time standpoint, but also from a travel standpoint. How have you managed? And, we think about work life oftentimes only asking women, but it certainly applies to everybody. How have you really managed those two things? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way?
I'm not sure, I've managed that all that well, to be quite frank. Do as I say, not as I do, is it's kind of, it's a tough thing, if you really like what you're doing, work doesn't always feel like work, especially in our industry. When you do travel, you tend to be around people who are hospitable, who are friendly, who are in the same boat you are in terms of that. You find commonalities, and and that makes work seem less like work. So, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, God bless my wife, who's, been, put up with my travel and, long hours for forever, my kids. But, I think at the end of the day, it's all about when you're home, you're there, and you make the most of that, doing whatever you can at that moment in time to help ease the pain of the past 2 weeks, even if it's an hour long. Let's go up to the beach, or let's go take a drive along the lake. We live by Lake Erie, and that's kind of soothing. So that work-life balance is a tough thing, and I guess the last thing I'll say is find something that you really like. I'm a big sports fan. I watch a lot of sports. I try to go to sporting events as I can, but truth be told, like when I come back from a very hectic, long trip, I go to my yard. I go dig. It helps work out a little bit of the stress, but then you also see, the fruits of your labor with your plants and your flowers and the like. So, balancing it by finding things you like both at work and at home, can help ease that stress. But it doesn't mean that there's never going to be stress, and you just have to try to manage that as best as you can.
Well, I appreciate that. That's great advice. One of the favorite questions we ask here at DEI Advisors is about advice to our younger selves. And the reason I like it so much is I think reflection is really important, and we are all works in progress. We continue to grow professionally, personally throughout our careers. What would you tell 21-year-old Jeff Higley about how things turned out, or something you could have done differently, or just in general about this incredible journey that you've been on?
Well, first of all, invest in Berkshire Hathaway, for crying out loud. And number two, stop following the Cleveland Browns. Browns fans will appreciate that. I've been thinking about this question, and it's a tough one to really come to a one thing, one piece of advice. But I guess the it goes back to just make sure you're true to yourself. Make sure you like what you're doing, that you feel good about where the direction you're heading, and just kind of go with the flow. If I could change anything about that, yeah, I mean, there's certain things, I would have become maybe a little bit of a tougher leader earlier, and maybe that would have enhanced my career trajectory a little faster. But all in all, I think most of the messages I would have to myself are, hey, you're doing okay. You're going to do okay if you stay on the path of doing what you think is right, and continue to have a little fun. Don't be afraid to have some fun.
I love that. Well, you definitely have had some fun. Jeff, I want to talk just very quickly about the motto of DEI Advisors, of course, is to empower personal success. And you've given some incredible insights, some of your reflections today. What is one additional piece of advice you would offer to our listeners about either a path to leadership or empowering their own personal success?
I would say find people that can help you. Find people that can be mentors. And that doesn't mean they have to be gray-haired, 40-year industry veterans. There are people next to you if you're in a cubicle, or there are people around you that you can elicit education from. All you have to do is open your eyes and listen. And I think that's what the final message I would have is that if you're a listener, you're going to do well. Because if you're a listener, you'll learn. And if you're a listener, you'll be able to understand what other people are thinking. And in this big human race evolution that we have going on, trying to understand what other people are thinking is becoming more difficult every day. But the more effort you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it, and truly, I think, help yourself get a better picture of where you're at and what directions you may have available to you.
Wow, that's tremendous advice. Very powerful. Be a good listener and be a good learner. Jeff, I have appreciated personally, professionally, your leadership in the industry. The many things that I have learned from you, our great collaboration in the past, and continuing forward on many of the things that you're involved with. So on behalf of the DEI Advisors team, just want to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights with us.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and to the whole DEI team. You've got a great team, and thank you for being part of it, and ditto to you. I've learned a lot from you, and will continue to do so. So I hope we continue to cross paths regularly.
Well, I'm sure we will, because one of my favorite things is always to flip the seats and get a chance to ask people the questions that are used to the ones who are doing all of the asking. But to our audience, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today. We hope that you have liked what you've heard, and you will visit us at DEIadvisors.org to hear from the many industry leaders who have shared their paths to leadership and the insights they've learned along the way. You can also stream all of our interviews from your favorite podcast streaming service. So with that, I say thank you so much to Jeff. Thank you so much to our audience, and we hope you'll tune in again.